Good afternoon. Welcome to Sports Nothing But Sports. I'm Ken Sterling. It's a game day. It's a game day. Game day. That's what we've got. It's a game day. Indiana, Illinois tonight in Champaign-Urbana. Game time, 8 o'clock. The network, Fox Sports 1. What's Indiana got to do to win? They got to score with pace, all right? Adjusted tempo, according to Ken Pom. Indiana, 261st in the country. Illinois, 31st. Illinois likes to run a little bit. They like to press. They like to push the tempo. They like to create turnovers and then points off turnovers. Indiana's got to take good care of the ball. With a fast tempo, I think Indiana's got a chance to play some really good offensive basketball. Defensively, I think they're going to enjoy it too. They've got to be fundamentally sound. They've got to execute. That's what they got to do. We'll see what happens. In Milwaukee, I think Indiana's going to win, by the way. They're 2-point dogs. I think they're going to cover and win outright. Pacers in Milwaukee taking on Giannis Antetokounmpo, who for my money is the best player in the NBA, bar none. He is terrific on both ends. Tonight, it's going to be trouble for Indiana. The Pacers, they're 11-point dogs. I think they're going to cover, but I think they're going to fail in the end to win this game against Milwaukee Bucks. The Greek Freak just too good. No Victor Oladipo, obviously. No Domas Sabonis either. So I think the Pacers are going to struggle a little bit on the road. Milwaukee has been on the road since February 23rd, so I think the Bucks going to get it done against the Pacers. I just don't think it's a very good matchup, especially down low. But that's why they play the game. Would it surprise me to see Indiana win this game? No, actually it would. I got to be honest. I'm not that optimistic about tonight. It would surprise me to see Indiana, the Pacers, win this game. Cubs in spring training. We're going to talk about the Cubs in spring training with Evan Altman of CubsInsider.com coming up in a little bit. Right now, Jerod Morris from Assembly Call. Tonight, Indiana, an incredibly important game in Champaign-Urbana playing against Illinois. What's Indiana got to do to win this thing?
Well, I think the most important thing they have to do is come out ready to play, which I know seems really, kind of simplistic, but it's easy to kind of forget how the beginning of that Michigan State game went, where, they really played well late and probably over the final 30 minutes, but it was a pretty listless beginning. I mean, Juwan really struggled. Romeo really struggled. And if it weren't for Justin Smith's offensive explosion, it would have been 20-1 Michigan State, And so they really, to their credit, they got it turned around and they won that game. But you can't go and do that on the road. Even though Illinois isn't, necessarily a world beater by any means, you can't go do that on the road because the style of defense they play, if you're not ready to, come out and be focused, they can really blitz you right off the bat. So I think that's the most important thing is, come ready to play for 40 minutes, really be ready to get off to a good start. And then, you're going to have to take care of the ball, obviously. You're going to have to make free throws because Illinois fouls more than anybody else because of their defense. So they will give you opportunities there, which Indiana is used to getting because they get to the line. They just have to make them. And then I think defensively, Indiana needs to continue to defend the three-point line well, which they've done a great job of. And the big guy for Illinois, Georgie, who really killed him in the first game, had 18 points on 8 of 9 shooting. That was with Deron and Race Thompson both out, and Juwan Morgan just had to kind of play matador defense to not pick up fouls. You got to defend him better, make him inefficient, and I think Indiana should be in a better position to do that because they'll have Deron and Race available to play some minutes. So, if you can kind of do those things, I think you'll be right there at the end and have a chance to win. And then, like it usually does in Indiana games, it's going to come down to, can you make 6-7 threes and can you make your free throws? And if you do, if Indiana does, they'll win because I think they're the more talented team. But this Illinois team is playing well. It's going to be a tough environment. So Indiana's really going to have to go out there and earn it.
And Indiana likes to slow it down a little bit in terms of tempo. They're in the back half, according to Ken Pom, in terms of Division I basketball teams. And then Illinois really likes to push the tempo, create turnovers, capitalize on the turnovers, score off the turnovers. Indiana's going to have to take really good care of the ball.
They are. There's no question about it. And, Indiana does like to push the pace when they can. For instance, they had 15 fast break points to just 2 for Michigan State in that last game because the Hoosiers had 13 steals. And the thing to remember, when it comes to turnovers is Illinois, they are probably going to turn you over. And Indiana turned it over 15 times the first game playing without Rob Finney. Indiana turned Illinois over 21 times. And when Indiana is really playing well, their defense is creating some steals and leading to some run out opportunities. And I think in half-court situations, there will be times where Indiana will struggle against Illinois because Indiana is not a very good passing team, and Illinois really defends the passing lanes well. But what Indiana did basically late in the first half of that first game was they just said, look, you have no one that can guard Romeo Langford. Romeo, we're giving you the ball up top. Go. And he scored 28 points, was 11 of 15 from the free throw line. I think he's going to need to be great tonight. And I think, Indiana's going to have to, it's one of those things. You got to kind of balance your aggressiveness and your patience in the half court. But when they do get those transition opportunities, they really need to push it because this team needs to find ways to get easy baskets because they're just not consistent enough in the half court.
If Indiana wins this game and they manage to beat Rutgers at Simon Scott Assembly Hall on Sunday, which they should, are they in the tournament or do they have to do some damage up in Chicago? You're in a much better position at 17 and 14, obviously. From the bracketologists that I've talked to, if you get that first win, because if they win those two games, they'll get the Wednesday bye. They'll play on Thursday. You get that first win, 18. You're feeling good. Like at that point, you might be able to get in, depending on what happens on the bubble, how many bid thieves there are. If they can then go win the second game, get a 19th win, it'll probably be another quad one victory because it'll be a quality opponent. And then I think you'd really feel good. At that point, if they can get to 19 wins with the quality of wins they have, I'd be surprised if they didn't make it. So, that's what's there. Now, obviously, that would require winning 6 straight games, which, back in November or December didn't seem crazy. But after what we've seen in January and February, that seems like a tall task. But, just keep taking them one game at a time. And I think if they can do that, it's, all these games are winnable. So I think if they can get to 19, they would feel pretty good. And at 18, you're probably sweating Selection Sunday right down to the last minute. That's Jerod Morris from Assembly Call. Assembly Call, all the boys, Jerod, Ryan, Andy, everybody tonight after the game at assemblycall.com. You guys do a great post-game show. I look forward to it, Jerod. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure, Kent. Thank you.
All right, so here's Evan Altman, our old friend from the radio show from CubsInsider.com. You spent some time out in spring training, Evan. You saw some things, and so what'd you see with the Cubs? What do you feel?
Yeah, it's a little difficult, but thankfully the games I was at, so I saw them play the Brewers and the White Sox. You get a couple of rivalries, and I think actually Sunday's game against the Sox set a spring training attendance record. So there were just over 16,000 people there, apparently, wow. Which doesn't sound like a lot for like a real game, but for the spring, it's a pretty big deal. And both teams pretty much had regular season lineups out there. Got to see John Lester and Yu Darvish start in the respective games. Both teams were kind of going for it. Now it falls apart sort of after the third inning, to where the reserves come in. The Cubs put up an 8 spot on the Sox, but I think the biggest things we're seeing. So Darvish hit 97 in his start, which is, anybody who watched him last year, that was unheard of with the injury. So I think that seeing that velocity that early, seeing Chris Bryant just jump all over a ball, launch it over the berm, that was really good. I mean, just it's a cool thing to see. But when you see a guy like that who looked like he was pressing last year and who you could see, I wrote about this when I said he looked like a car in which the emergency brake was still engaged and trying to drive. That's what he looked like. And this is like effortless. The old, that long swing that you're just like, how does that guy generate power? It doesn't even look like he's really got any bat speed because he's so big and long, but he just crushed it and just jumped. So that was really cool. Watched Dylan Maples work, and he's kind of, a guy who I've been a huge fan of, and to see him out there throwing high 90s, hasn't walked anybody yet, which is insane. The slider is working really well. So there's little things like that, but then, it all kind of comes out in the wash when you're sitting out there and it's 75 and sunny and you got a beer in your hand and you just kind of tend to like zone out on any real details and just go, okay, this is cool.
So you mentioned Darvish hitting 97. The thing that I've seen, and I've watched a little bit on TV, and then I'm looking at the box scores, and I saw yesterday's box score, Cubs against the Royals. And it looks like Chatwood has figured out how to hit the strike zone. He's pitched 8 innings. He's only given up 1 walk. That is a really good sign, isn't it?
It really is. And it's almost, it's sort of weird, right? Because not that you ever wish ill on anyone, but his kind of failure to be able to throw strikes last year, in addition to Darvish being hurt, is, that's why the Cubs had to go after Cole Hamels to make the trade there. It's why they had to pick up the $20 million option for Hamels. And there's almost a part of you that just wishes he would continue to suck so bad that they could just walk away and then it's not even an issue. And I don't mean that for his sake. I'm just saying, for the Cubs, like, that makes it easy. Well, now here's a guy who's pitching and Darvish is healthy. So now they got these 2 guys who, so far are pitching like the players the Cubs thought they signed last year. But then they've also got Hamels, and Hamels is clearly going to be in the rotation. Darvish clearly in the rotation. So then what do you do with Chatwood? And again, the easy answer is long relief, but he's being paid like a starter. And so it's never a bad thing to have too many options. You just kind of wonder, like, how does he slide in? And he's been a reliever, so I guess I shouldn't go too far. He's been a swing man. That's kind of what his role was the last couple of years with the Rockies. So he's there with that. But man, if he can be that guy, because he does miss bats, he has really good stuff. And if he's able to work the zone, and you could put him in there, because the fear with him being a reliever was that at least as a starter, you're out there long enough to where the walks, you can sort of work around them. But as a reliever, you're only supposed to be out there for 1-2 innings, and you walk 2 guys, that could be the death knell. So if he's able to go out there and do that, that does give the Cubs a lot more flexibility than, they're going to see Hamels come off the books, right? Everybody gets another year older. Some of that money starts to fall off, and then maybe he can slot back in there somehow. So it's definitely been impressive. And I think the thing to look at, and if I'm remembering, that walk came early on, I think he gave up a homer right after that. And that was the 2 runs that he's allowed. But a lot of that, you sort of have to look past. Like, there's certain things you look at, you say, hey, as long as he's not walking guys, because some people look at these other numbers like, oh, he gave up a home run. But a lot of this stuff right now in the spring is some of these guys, like the home run Maples gave up. Like I mentioned, he gave one up to the White Sox, but it was on a fastball, and the guy took a 97-mile-an-hour fastball out oppo. But part of his issue, just like Chatwood, is finding the strike zone. Some of these guys are just going to pump fastballs to make sure they throw strikes. And so you kind of take some of the results with a grain of salt going, this is not the way he would normally sequence his pitches. And so the big takeaway I have there is, again, no walks. So if this dude's figured it out, I think you and I texted about it a few days ago. He kind of had a little stabbing, he's sort of changed his delivery, and he was kind of noisy with it. And he had this kind of stabbing motion with his hand, and he's eliminated that. And it's caused him, as he was sort of doing that, he was overcorrecting and sort of pulling his whole body, and then as a result, kind of pulling the ball through a little bit too much and just getting wild. If that's gone, then all of a sudden, if they've fixed him, quote unquote, you've got a stud there who can come in and work long relief, or maybe, work as a 6th starter every time, every couple times through. So I think it's huge. It's just, it kind of creates a little bit of a complication, but a good one.
Are there any roster spots that we should be, any guys who are kind of creeping toward that 25th spot? Are there any in question right now?
Not really, only because, again, with Chatwood kind of being established there, and then you look at, while Brandon Morrow is still out, there could be a little bit of that stuff on the back end. There's a guy like an Alan Webster who the Cubs had brought on last year, who there was some weird stuff with his availability, but brought him back on a minor league deal. But, is he a guy who they even call up because he doesn't have any options, but there's really no room, and does he really fit? So there's, maybe a guy there. But otherwise, the major league roster is pretty well set. These guys are all healthy. They're coming back. Addison Russell suspended for the first month. And so you'll see more than anything, I would say they carry an extra pitcher because they got plenty of middle infielders. So right now, other than maybe a little intrigue with that catcher position, do they remain sold on Victor Caratini? He popped a home run recently. He's going to be playing first base in Thursday's game. You got a Martin Maldonado who's still out there. I'll continue to harp on. if the Cubs chose to go that route and kind of replace that backup catcher position. But right now, it looks like they're pretty set to roll with what they've got in camp, minus, again, a few guys that could shuffle around because of injuries or what have you.
You sound kind of bullish. And we're talking to Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com, but you sound like if the regular season started today, you'd feel pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard not to when, and certainly I don't want to look at this as like spring results and win-loss or anything like that, because again, so far we haven't seen starters going into the third inning. We're seeing, the hitters are getting 2 at-bats or plate appearances, and that's really about it. But I think when you look at the things you needed to see, let's check the boxes, like Darvish healthy, check. Darvish happy, check. I mean, he's been super loose. He's not using an interpreter. There's a lot of things I think you can extrapolate out about that in a very good way. Chris Bryant healthy, check. Tyler Chatwood not walking people, check. All starters healthy and accounted for, double check. And now we've got, the Cubs are notoriously slow about incorporating their veteran relievers, but we've seen appearances, Strop is Pedro Strop, Brad Brock had the issue with mono. That was a little bit of funky touch and go, kind of with the contract being restructured. He's going to be out there. We're seeing these guys make their appearances. And so any of those major question marks I think that we had going in have been answered, at least to the degree to which we can effectively do so while we're still 3 weeks out.
That's Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com. Thanks for the time and insight. Appreciate it, Evan.
No problem. Always happy to join.
That's sports, nothing but sports, no exceptions. I'm Kent Sterling. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Breakfast with Kent on Periscope Live, Facebook Live, SoundCloud, iTunes, all over the place. And then again tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. Sports, nothing but sports. I'm Kent Sterling. Have a great night, a game night. Go Hoosiers, go Pacers.